Don't stop.
Hi, thanks for joining me on the Everything and Anything and a Bit Gay podcast. I love interesting people, and there's certain topics that I get fixated on, and I'm moving past this phase, but I love the whole psychedelic-assisted healing piece. I love people that want to talk about going to retreats and doing mushrooms, and they had their spirit guides, and what happens when you die, and just all that stuff. I've gotten really into it. And I'm reading a lot of books about it. This past week, I was away on vacation and read a book, and it was about all this stuff. And I mean, I'll have to say one thing that this podcast has, since I've started it, has really made me change my mind about is what happens when we die. And so I've been doing this podcast for about a year and 9 months, and I've met some really fascinating people, and I can't wait to do my 100th episode to talk about where I think I am. And this may come out after my 100th episode, but my podcast has made me just think of things so differently. And my guest today, she has helped with assisted mushroom therapy and retreats and doing that. And she's talked about, repressed early childhood trauma and, trying to get away from that. I was lucky. Not that I can remember. I didn't have a childhood trauma. I had a really normal, good childhood growing up. But I think that everybody has some trauma. So maybe mine was being gay and not realizing or wanting to accept it, and my parents finding out. That was probably some of the trauma that I had. I don't know. I always had friends. I was always, kind of popular feeling, I guess. Always the life of the party. And, but I think I tried ketamine therapy also whenever I was living in Dallas, Texas. And it was with a physician, and it was monitored. And I've talked about this in previous podcasts, and it didn't help do what I wanted it to do. My hope was that ketamine was going to help me sleep, lay down at the end of the day and go to sleep. And it did not help me with that. But what it did help me with is it helped me move past my father dying, which happened, a decade before when I did this. And, and it wasn't like I was grieving him. At least I didn't think I was. I would just think about him every single day. And I didn't want to think about him every day. I didn't want to have something about my father coming into my head every day, whether it's a good memory, a bad memory, or any memory. I just wanted to live my life and think about people the way I would think about them in normal circumstances. But that's what ketamine helped me do. It helped me move past thinking about my father every day. I don't think about him as often, which is great for me because that's what I wanted. And the funny thing is that when the doctor started the first ketamine IV with me, he says, think about something that, that you want to fix. And I kept thinking, sleep. I want to sleep. I want to sleep better. And then I ended up in the back of my head thinking, I'd like to stop thinking about my father every day. So I didn't get to sleep, but I got my father out of my head. And I love my father more than anything and wish he was still here. But again, I just didn't want to think about him every day. So enjoy this podcast episode with Kristy. She is got a lot of interesting thoughts, the way the world works and what happens when you die and treatments. And I thought she was pretty amazing to talk with. So I hope you enjoyed the episode as much as I made doing the interview. I'm going to do that last part over. So I hope you enjoy listening to the episode as much as I enjoyed doing the interview. Thanks for listening. Hi, thanks for joining me on the Everything and Anything and a Bit Gay podcast. I'm thrilled to welcome my guest today, Kristy Danielle Crabtree, who is a wife, a mother, an author, an intuitive conscious coach, and a licensed therapist. She's passionate about deep healing. We're going to talk today about psychedelic psychotherapy, techniques to help individuals release stored trauma and full embody the unique gifts that they've been given. She's an author. She has her own podcast, and we're going to talk about all this today. So welcome to the show, Kristy.
Thanks so much, Zach. Thanks so much for having me on.
So before we actually started recording this podcast, I just was telling you, like, I could probably spend like 5 days with you kind of talking about all the things. You have a really great Instagram, and I did some searching on you on Google, and there's so much great things out there about you. So I really appreciate you being on the show. But start the conversation talking about kind of healing trauma and
Right.
how you got started in that, and kind of some of the things that you do.
Absolutely. So my path to healing trauma started out with traditional psychotherapy.
Okay.
I got trained in all of the typical modalities that are evidence-based to help people, like EMDR and internal family systems, and then some not so traditional ones like hypnosis, because I realized it's so important to go deeper. And as I was kind of in this process of both learning these modalities, I wasn't just a student of these modalities. I would actually go seek them out. I wanted to be a client too, because I always tell my clients there's not a modality that I will subject you to that I haven't also tried myself and have some kind of testimonial of. So those modalities were great. And I felt like I served a lot of people with them. And in my parallel journey of doing therapy myself, because I think therapists should, I kind of realized for myself, it feels like there's something more. And it's like I couldn't get to the more in these modalities that I was subjecting myself to as a client. And it wasn't until I opened up the gates of psychedelic psychotherapy to myself that I realized what the more was. And for me, that was repressed trauma memories.
Okay.
And it was in healing those repressed trauma memories that I found my own gifts. And so it led me on this journey of healing myself, and then ultimately healing others and helping other people connect back into themselves, because trauma just fractures us from self and from spirit.
Yeah. And so you did this exploration, like where you were kind of like looking for things, and you were exploring these things and trying to like figure out like what's the best way to do this. And how many people have you helped with this?
My gosh. I mean, I'm going to date myself here, but I've been a therapist since 2008. So gosh, it's been almost decades, right?
Yeah.
The psychedelic psychotherapy, though, I was trained by the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, or better known as MAPS. A lot of people have heard of Rick Doblin. You guys have probably seen him on the Joe Rogan podcast.
Yeah.
But I was formerly trained at MAPS. I'm trained in ketamine-assisted psychotherapy and also psilocybin. And so, unfortunately, MDMA and psilocybin aren't legal, not at least in my state. So ketamine is something that I can use in office with people, and that I use regularly with the oversight of a naturopathic doctor. And we've helped a lot of people, with that modality.
So I did ketamine therapy. I was living in Dallas, and I have a horrible, horrible time sleeping. Like I can never sleep. And so I kept reading about ketamine therapy, and I went to this doctor, and I went, I think it was 3 times a week for 2 weeks. And the first session was different. I'd never done ketamine before, because I know people do it like, they were doing it in clubs and stuff whenever I was growing up in South Beach and stuff. And it was, so obviously this is with a doctor. He was an anesthesiologist. So this was not just me going to some random person. And then I felt the effects of it, and he was monitoring my heart rate and pulse and everything. Like, so it was the real deal. And then I went into the second session I went into, he increased the dosage, and it was way too much. And I like got in my own head and stuff, but he didn't. He told me at the beginning, like, I want you to think of something that you want to try to make better, not just sleep, but something that's maybe bothered you. And when I went in, and before he gave me the IV of the ketamine, I thought, oh, I would like to stop thinking about my father every day, because my father died. And I don't want to forget about my father, but I don't want to like think about it every single day of my life. And it worked. It didn't help me sleep, but it helped me.
Mhm.
It helped me get rid of thinking about my dad every day. And
Yeah. You're speaking to something really powerful, which is that, default mode network of the brain.
mhm,
And so often those kind of circular thoughts that we have, those repetitive thoughts are ingrained. And
yeah,
every time we think them, it's like we kind of reinforce those neurotransmitters. And what you're speaking to is this opportunity we get in expanded states of awareness to kind of tone down that default mode network and get outside of these normal circular ways of thinking. And when you're taking something like ketamine, there is something released called BDNF, or brain derived neurotrophic factor. And
yeah,
that actually is an agent in the brain that we have when we're real little and we're learning, and we get flooded with it in our brain. So we learn, oh, hey, default mode network, hey, brain, there's a more adaptive way to be. And we can learn it, and we can carve new, more adaptive channels into the brain. So I think you're speaking to a really powerful experience with ketamine that people often report.
yeah. And like I said, I went through 6 sessions total. The second one was a lot, but then he lowered the dosage and got me to like the right one by the third one. And I went through it, and I just, I was hoping it was going to be a miracle and it was going to help me like be able to just lay down, go to sleep. It didn't, but it did help me with my dad. So I'm grateful for that. I had a friend that went to a couple's house that lives in Arizona, and he did kind of like a mushroom therapy where
Mhm.
he did it. It was like an 8-hour session or 6 or 8 hour session. And then he was microdosing kind of after that. And his mother died before he, that's why he went to do this. And this couple has been doing this. They're an older couple. They've been doing it for decades with people.
Mhm.
So it's like you're in their home, you're safe. They know what they're doing. They're not going to let you like kind of freak out or whatever he was worried about happening. And they gave him the right dosage and stuff. And he said that he was in space at one point during his first session, and he was talking to his mom and kind of just working things out with her. And, he said it was a little trippy and stuff. And then he was microdosing, and then he wanted to do it one more time, and he went back and did it again. He said it was an amazing experience again. And he continues to microdose every day now. But,
Mhm.
he's like, it was life changing in a lot of ways. And it helped him kind of get past the trauma of losing his mother. So,
What a gift, right, for him to receive. I mean, I think psilocybin, when you think about psilocybin, mycelium is what the fruiting body of the mushroom grows from. And the mycelium is kind of what connects all the plants underneath the earth to
mhm.
each other. And
Yeah.
it does the same thing in the neural networks of our brain. It has this connective ability to make new novel connections and to go outside of our normal awareness and realize that we're connected through love, even after the soul transitions. And so we glean these beautiful truths. And I think for me, even as a grief counselor, it's like, there's nothing more healing than to embody. Because I could have told your friend that the soul survives physical death, but until you
Yeah.
experience the soul surviving physical death and
Yeah.
connecting to that soul, it's not wisdom. And your cells in your body, your
Yeah.
DNA don't understand that. So healing can't fully occur. But something about experiential wisdom of knowing I can still talk to my mother and that those bonds of love never die is so incredibly healing.
Yeah. So what do you think happens when we die?
Um, I think that there are layers and layers and layers of realities that exist beyond this material, third dimensional one that we're living now. And
Yeah.
I actually, in my experiences with people in these journeys and my own experiences, feel that when we die, wherever our soul is vibrating or resonating with is kind of what we will be experiencing when we die. And I think that's also subject to change as our
Yeah.
soul grows on the other side too, because you hear about these near-death experiencers having these hellish type experiences
Yeah.
or people having angelic type experiences. And I don't believe in this traditional heaven or hell, but what I do believe is that we're creators. God, they say that we're made in the image of likeness in God, which means we create our reality. And here in
Mhm.
this dense form of reality, there's a delay in creation, and we have to really believe it on every level in order to manifest and create it. But there's no delay on the other side. So it's like the minute we leave the body, whatever it is that we believe will happen, I believe likely will. if we have a lot of shame or self-doubt, or we're like, oh, I do believe in hell and I'm afraid I was a bad person, we could experience some things that might be scary. But it's almost like the minute we shift our awareness into a
Yeah.
higher live or state of being, we shift our reality into that as well.
Yeah. Makes sense. So have you been a part of or kind of done these like psychedelic retreats though? Are there, I kind of read a little bit about the luxury psychedelic retreats. Have you been a part of that or led one of those?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Like, I can't do it in this state right now just because of legalities in
Yeah.
Arizona, but in Denver, Colorado, it's legal. And so or in Mexico, we could do psilocybin, retreats there. And it's really beautiful to watch.
So tell me what that experience is like. I would love to hear about, because I want to do it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So with psilocybin, oh my gosh, everybody's experience is so incredibly different. And what I've noticed from facilitating retreats is that the psyche seems to be layered. It's so layered. And it's like on the surface layer, is our thoughts, right? The world of thoughts. And people almost, they say the longest journeys from the head to the heart.
Mhm.
And so people who are real heady or who have been really cut off from their bodies, because when you think about it, when we have trauma, it's stored in the soma and the body. And so sometimes it's just safer to be in our thoughts, to think. And that's not a healthy way to be because it distracts us from feeling. And so if people have been real heady, the first step is really just to get them beyond the thought realm. And they'll find that their thoughts are looping or they're kind of uncomfortable in their thoughts. So it's really about slowing the thoughts down and getting them into the body. And what it is a process of surrender in psilocybin. And so being willing to release your thoughts, being willing to surrender to the strong emotions that come up as you do. And the emotions are kind of like that next layer that people learn to surrender into and then to resolve. And sometimes there's memories housed in those emotional layers. And then people get into the body and they start to have visceral feelings. Sometimes they're memories, sometimes it's bliss, sometimes they feel like they are in space, like your friend, having encounters with people on the other side. But what I've noticed is it's important to kind of do some of the emotional work and prepare before you go into psilocybin. And that's what I like to spend time with people to do, is to make sure they're in the proper mindset and to really poise the mind, to poise the emotional body so that they're ready, or they have an experience of surrender before they go into an expanded state of consciousness. And then once you start to resolve some of those layers, people have more transcendental type experiences. And sometimes they have those transcendental experiences while they're experiencing all those other things. I mean, it's a very complex and layered reality, and they tend to happen simultaneously. And so there's a lot of integration after that comes into play, so we can really start to make sense of what did I experience and how does that relate to my current reality, and how does that translate to me living a better life where I'm living with 2 feet in.
And what do you think it's not? I mean, I think it's crazy to me that it's not legal everywhere at this point, especially with a trained person kind of leading it. Like I mean, everyone that I have talked to, friends or people that I've interviewed that have done this, it's been life-changing for them in a good way. And so I've never talked to anybody that's had a bad experience with it. I mean, I guess if you took a ton of mushrooms on your own or anything like that, and you don't know what you're doing, you could have a bad trip or whatever. But like when you're doing it under like what you have performed, and when you're leading these things and you're trained to do this, and you're, like, I just don't understand like why we can't have that be something that's just part of society. It's just crazy to me.
It's crazy to me too. It truly is. And I mean, I think the fact that ketamine became legal is a big step in the right direction, but the FDA just disallowed MDMA for psychotherapeutic use, despite the fact that after 3 sessions, these veterans in the phase 3 clinical trials, 87% relief in their PTSD symptoms. You can't even, I mean, that's mind-blowing, astounding resolution to trauma that often leads to suicide in this population. And part of me has to just wonder if the powers that be would rather just have us on SSRIs medicated for the rest of our lives instead of finding true resolution.
Yeah, I seen that about how these veterans, like you just said, had horrible PTSD, and just like they do this sessions with the MDMA, and it's like they have their life back. They're like they can live a normal life. And it's just so sad that they did all this stuff for this country, and and they seen horrible things happen in war, and then we can't treat them with this. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah.
And there's so many clinical trials that have happened outside of this country, like in Switzerland, where I used to live at one point, in Basel, in the town, they had these huge clinical trials that were all showing so much success with helping people with trauma. So it's like the evidence is there, and I just don't understand why we don't move forward with doing that in this country. It's just it's another crazy thing to me.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I wholeheartedly agree. As a psychotherapist, I can see people for a long time, and we can do some really good work. But for people who really want to accelerate their healing and who feel called to participate or know their spirit on a deeper level, know their true essence, it's a gift. And I'm hopeful, that in the next 5 years, 10 years, we'll see this be available to people legally.
And we'll be right back. Okay, and now back to the show. What is your thoughts on when people go, this is something I wouldn't do, even though I think other people, if they do it, it's great. But kind of going into Peru or Costa Rica and going to a shaman and doing ayahuasca and stuff, I think it just scares me because I've watched documentaries or I watched specials where people have done that, and they're sick, they're throwing up, then they're crying, and they're in the middle of this forest or jungle, and I felt like if I freaked out or something, and I didn't have the right medical care or something, I think it just scares me. But I think doing something like you're talking about the retreat. But what is your thoughts on kind of people going to Peru or Costa Rica and doing that with a shaman?
There's pros and cons. What I love about those experiences is, especially with ayahuasca, this is a generational indigenous tradition that's held sacred. And there's something about connecting to that plant and the teacher spirit, grandmother ayahuasca, in that plant with an ayahuasquero who is trained in these techniques to kind of disseminate that knowledge and that awareness of the spirit with the plant that can be so sacred. But then, part of ayahuasca is the purge. So yes, you're going to get a bucket and you're going to be throwing up, and you might be body purging too. I mean, that's just, there's something about ayahuasca. It's part of the experience. And it's interesting with ayahuasca because when you do purge, it actually feels right. It feels good.
Yeah.
As hard as that is to wrap your head around.
Yeah. I mean, I could see that.
It's very interesting. I mean, with ayahuasca, it's like when you purge, you're only purging when the negative or trauma memories come up. But when you're experiencing bliss, you don't feel sick at all. And so it's it's very, it's purification, it's cleansing, and cleansing has to happen on all levels. But I do see some of those places in the jungle where the containers, in my opinion, are big to an unethical degree, where you're opening up your energy fields, which is very porous and in expanded state, to sometimes 50, 60 people, right, in these groups. And I don't know how any shaman could keep a safe, clean container energetically and attend to all those people. So, you're absorbing what's coming into that container when you're open and porous. And I sometimes that's just too much for many people.
Yeah. How did you kind of get interested in this? Just because you talked about, you were kind of doing more traditional therapy, hypnosis and stuff. And is this just something that you're like, this is all great, kind of like you said, but there's got to be more? And is that what really got you interested in kind of exploring some of these alternative ways of doing things?
Yes, and yes,
okay.
And the and is I felt like I knew myself. I felt like a self-aware person. I felt like somebody who's always open to exploration. And when I did psilocybin for the first time, that was guided, I tapped into something that felt like terror in my body. Oh. And I talked to the shaman and I said, I don't understand this. I have no memories connecting into this terror. Is this something that the medicine just brings up in people? Mm-hmm. And he goes, no, it's something inside of you. And I'm like, it's unfamiliar to me. but so familiar at the same time. And I was perplexed by this. And so I would like go in and try to tap into that feeling and kind of flirt with it, but it was really scary to me. And so like I would dip my toe in and kind of come out. And and in the meantime, I'm having other, really great experiences, and I'm learning about these layers of consciousness and these spatial realities outside of this time space. And it was really cool, but always that terror would come up. And it took me about a year or so of flirting with that and getting to know it safely that I finally was able to dive in with 2 feet when I did a hero's dose of psilocybin. And what came up was early childhood sexual abuse trauma.
And you just blocked it out?
I had no idea. I was under the age of 3. And what the medicine, I was really early. And what the medicine revealed to me, it was so crazy, Zach, because it's not like the trauma just came up. All of a sudden, I'm at peace and I'm looking around as if everything's new in the room. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm just loving awareness. And the shaman said, well, what does that mean? And I was like, it's very young. Like, it's like I'm seeing the world through a real little kid's eyes. And like everything is new and everything in the room around me, like I'm trying to understand and make sense of, but I have no words. There's no narrative for it yet. So I'm just in this state of awe, like a young child. And he was like, oh, this is beautiful. And then this assault on my nervous system. And then the memories came in. And then I had no words because I was so little and I didn't have a vocabulary to describe what was happening to my body. So what I was being made aware of is that the terror, the feeling of being so unsafe and not being able to run, not being able to do anything. And so I shrank and just kind of like my energy became so small and curled into itself and there were no words. And so it was stored that way, like this sense of collapse and this sense of terror. And so I had to be regressed consciously back to that state before words to release what that was from the nervous system. And I will be honest with you, I denied it. I was just like, there's no way. I'm a self-aware person.
Yeah.
I've always like tried to get to know myself and try to understand things. I don't shy away from healing or learning. And I was devastated because I was devastated that it happened, but I was devastated that do I lie to myself? Am I that self-dishonest?
Yeah.
Has my life been a lie? And the answer was yes, because I had called the person who was associated with those memories. And I just said, hey, I'm having some really early childhood memories come up. I said, it's kind of weird. It happened. I just said it happened in a dream. Because in that session, I got another piece of information, which was my grandpa was having affairs when I was little. No, was he? Was he not? I don't know. Like nobody ever talked about that. And that wasn't anything anybody told me. But I told this person, did grandpa used to have affairs? And this person's response was, I never touched you, right? Like, I just asked you if grandpa had affairs. I've never asked you that. And he goes, well, we can get a third party involved if you need to, but that's disgusting. And I was just like, okay, I've got to go. I need to process this. And so this was years later. And I never brought it to that person's awareness because that is such a big, awful accusation. And to falsely accuse anybody of that would be horrendous.
But why would they say that just out of the blue when you're asking them another question? They basically admitted it.
That's how it felt to my system. And so, it was like the guilt or shame or whatever that had been locked up for years. Like when it was almost like when they heard early childhood memory, it just triggered something because there was nothing. I mean, as I was going through this process of really unraveling what I had been through and trying to remember, only my best friend and my husband and the person I was working with through these journeys, they were the only people that had any inclination because it wasn't something I was certain of. I thought maybe, I don't know. I mean, there's false memories that can happen. There's all kinds of things. Like maybe it's a fear I've had or a concern. I don't want to make a big deal out of this until I'm certain. But I did get that one other little tidbit of information. And when I brought it to that person's attention, that's what happened. And then at that point, I was just like, okay, I have no other explanation than exactly that.
Wow. It's crazy how you could hide that, that trauma. Like, and and are you just like, have you cut that person out of your life at this point now? Okay, good.
Yeah, I have. And as hard as that was, it was very liberating.
Yeah.
So since then, it's just been this path of like spiritual awakening. And what I've come to realize after my own experience is that when we're little and we can't process a trauma in the moment because our families are our families, right?
Yeah.
And if they're causing the trauma, you certainly aren't safe to process it in that container. We our cells are very adaptive. So they go, okay, that's fine. We're going to just create this little neural peptide that's going to hold this memory for you in your body. And we're just going to keep it there. And it creates just a little bit of inflammation. So wherever you associate your trauma, it stores in the body with just a little bit of inflammation and it attaches to a cell. And so you have to get to that cellular level of trauma to heal it. But once you unburden the cell of that neural peptide, it's as if the DNA itself opens and can hold more light. And when it holds more light, you bring more of your spirit into your body and you're less dense, you're vibrating higher. And that's really the catalyst to opening up your spiritual gifts.
And are people, when they come to you, are they ever nervous because they know there's something, but they don't know what it is? And are they nervous that they don't want to go there to try to figure it out at the same time, but they want to know?
Yeah, that can happen. And that's been people's experiences that I've worked with. I feel like nothing happens by mistake. And as painful as my past experiences were, I wouldn't change them because I know how to walk through the dark with people and I know how to hold their hand in those places. And for some people, it is just a fear. But for other people, those fears are legitimate. And they have to discern that on their own. It's a journey, and you have to be very careful when you're facilitating not to make meaning or allude to something that isn't true and real for that person. It's up to them to decipher those things for themselves, to keep some purity around what they are experiencing so they can come to their own conclusions. But it can be very confusing when there are repressed memories to unravel that information.
And if people are kind of skeptical, like they don't necessarily believe in this whenever they come to you, does that hurt their progress of kind of making headway with their trauma or whatever? Mm-hmm. Or does the medicine, it's going to do whatever it needs to do no matter how they're feeling in their head?
It is. The medicine is conscious and it guides our consciousness. And, the beautiful thing is it meets people where they're at. And if people are skeptical, that is okay, because we can meet people where they're at too. Like I said, it's kind of this process of surrender. So sometimes the people who are skeptics tend to live a little more in their head. And so it's really starting at the head and at the level of thought and helping them to release the thought and connect more into their hearts and into their bodies and to maybe feel something that they haven't experienced. Because when you feel something that you haven't experienced, it could shift the way you think about reality. And although I don't have an agenda for people, I trust that God has an agenda with people and I'm there to facilitate. So it's not about me and my agenda, it's about theirs. And so I surrender my hopes or expectations or agendas to truly try to meet them exactly where they are so that they can just uncover one more layer, surrender just a little bit deeper, wherever that is.
Can you tell me a story? Obviously without telling me the name of the person or anything, but tell me one of the most fascinating stories of people that's had such a huge transformation and you're just like, that you've changed their life because of this.
Oh my gosh. Well, there's so many, but one that's like really top of mind because it just happened was an experience I had with a young woman who did psilocybin. And she goes, oh my gosh, there's a spirit guide here who's an extraterrestrial. She had no belief in extraterrestrials before this day, but she was like, this ET woman is telling me that there's mold in my apartment. And she had just moved in with her fiance to this apartment and she was crushed because her and her girlfriend or fiance at the time Like they were just starting their lives together, just moving in. And she was like, oh my gosh, we can't afford to move. Like, I don't even want to, I want to pretend that that's not
Yeah.
even a thing. And this was almost a year ago, but she was rocked. She's like, what is this extraterrestrial? What does this mean? And it brought her into some like very early childhood things that she processed and was able to really work through and uncover. Well, I got a call weeks ago and she said, I'm so sick. And she's like, I have this rash all over my body. She's like, you're never going to believe this, Kristy. It's mold. And she's like, tell me I'm not crazy. She's like, please tell me that you remember last year that this ET spirit guide told me that there was mold in the apartment. I go, you are not making that up. I remember it, like, because you wanted to deny it so bad. You know what I mean? So you were wrestling with yourself in the session, trying to deny that. I totally remember. And she, sure enough, got an inspector out to her apartment and it is riddled with mold. And she had to move out on an emergency basis. And I mean, for her, that single experience shifted her whole perception of reality because she's like, well, what does this mean? Does this mean that these light beings are real? Like I'm much more intuitive than I thought. And beyond like the woo of it, because that part's pretty cool, but on a deeper level for her, what that meant is, oh my gosh, I can trust me. And in my trauma, I disconnected from myself and I was so riddled with self-doubt that I wouldn't trust myself. But she's like, now I know that I know what I know. I know what I know and I don't need to deny that anymore. And so when you can live with yourself in a way that that's honest, even when it's hard, it's life-changing. And that's exactly what that experience did for this young woman.
You know, you probably saved years of her being in that apartment, not realizing it was mold, you know, because you did this for her. Because I think a lot of people have, when they have these mold issues, they live years there like, oh, I'm just sick. What is it? What is it? And you probably like saved years of her having to be sick and stuff. So that's amazing. That's an amazing story.
It was incredible. And now her and her fiance moved into a beautiful home and, you know, they're getting resettled, which is wonderful. But, you know, and it was her. Like, I give all the credit to her because she trusted her intuition. She allowed herself to get beyond her fear and to like listen to this ET guide that was coming in that initially was a little scary, but she was able to put the fear aside and be open and listen. And it's so beautiful.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors. Okay, now back to the show. So whenever people are doing this, do they a lot of times do they have a guy that comes to them, whether it's an ET or not? Just is that pretty common?
They do, yeah. It is common. And, you know, it's really interesting because I like to couple my psychedelic work with internal family systems therapy, which is a evidence-based psychotherapeutic modality. And there's a concept called self-energy. And when we connect to self-energy, which is the part of us that's like that observing consciousness that's most connected to source, in that space, our guides do come in. And so it's interesting because even through this internal family systems lens, Dick Schwartz talks about how guides are a part of the psychotherapeutic process. And it does seem in my experiences that people do tend to connect with them more readily or more easily on these medicines because the protective system or parts of us, that doubt or that fear or whatever, are kind of pushed to the side. Like they take a back seat. So the most pure part of our essence, if we allow it to come forward, it's so natural.
Yeah.
It's so natural to connect with these things. And there's subtle influences around us that we're just unaware of all the time. But when we can surrender the parts that doubt, we can start to see these subtle influences and how they really do impact our daily lives. So it's very common.
Can you tell me just a little bit about like what somebody would experience if they went on one of these luxury retreats? Like luxury retreat sounds amazing to me. So that's why I'm just, it's, I think it's, again, like going to Peru and doing it in a forest is not for me, but a luxury retreat would kind of be for me. So tell me like what that experience is like.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You know, we always start it with a lot of intentionality. So we start the retreats not with the medicine, but really working with the individual psyche of the person. Intention setting and making sure we're in the right mindset is critical. So we often start with breath work. Have you done holotropic or, you know, any kind of breath work before?
No, I mean, the only thing I've done is I was taught how to do transcendental meditation, and that's like the furthest kind of I've done, which is, I think it was life changing in a lot of ways, where it just kind of helped me clear my mind. But unfortunately, I feel like I don't do it. You're supposed to do it every day, twice a day for 20 minutes, and I don't. And I wish I could just make myself do that, because I think I would be so much more calm if I would.
So true, right? I know. Yeah, meditation is incredible. Is life-changing. And, breathwork's interesting because it can almost like put you into that state of meditation relatively quickly. There's an activating breath that you can do to kind of activate the energies in your body. And you actually can track where those neuropeptides are stored in your body. You start to feel it buzzing. And when you're doing like a more masculine activating breath, you start to like tense up in the places where your body's holding the trauma. And then you switch into this feminine, receptive breath. And then you start to get downloads from spirit or God or whatever you want to call it, where you get a lot of insight and awarenesses. So we often start just by introducing people to their bodies in a more gentle way through breath work and helping them. Oftentimes the intention will kind of unfold through a breathwork ceremony. We'll do internal family systems. Individuals sometimes are in a group setting to prepare them and to really get acquainted with what are my parts, right? Like I have a high achiever part who works and seems busy a lot, or people tend to have like I scroll on Instagram too much part, or a part of them. But all of these, a suicidal part even, but all of these parts have this positive intention for us. They're like, I just want you to be okay, and I want you to be able to survive the day. So we really start to try to reduce shame, and that really mitigates or reduces the probability of somebody having a bad trip, because we're not going in blind. We're getting to know the landscape of the psyche and then setting an intention to facilitate the process. And not that the process always matches the intention, because I think in medicine, we get what we need, not necessarily what we want, like your ketamine experience. Maybe you weren't sleeping better, but you got this beautiful, resolution around your dad's passing. But what I find is, everything is connected. And so when we do the ceremony with people, they find, wow, okay, this is how it connected to my intention. And then maybe took it a step further or went in a direction I wasn't expecting, but it somehow connects back. And then, we spend time processing and integrating stargazing. Sometimes, I don't know if you know Dr. Stephen Greer. I've trained with him and learned like CE5 contacts. So sometimes we'll do some stargazing and commune with the stars or with ETs and things like that.
So tell me about that. I'm so interested in that, because you had interdimensional beings that I read as part of your introduction, or whenever I was reading more about you. Tell me about that. I think that's so fascinating.
So that caught me off guard. When I was on this healing journey, I was not like the girl that was into aliens. Just wasn't me. I didn't really care, didn't really have interest. I like to study psychic phenomena. I like to study like angels and spirit guides. That was the extent of it. Aliens, I'm like, I don't know, maybe. But I did a journey, and it was like the last time I had to like really, really do the somatic work of healing my early childhood trauma.
Okay.
And that night I was under the stars in Mexico, and all of a sudden, and the journey was over. It was over. I was like back in my body. I was ready to go inside and go to bed. Like it was over. But all of a sudden, the stars literally, like this ship came out of nowhere. And it's like it shined a light up to these stars, and I could see holograms. It was almost as if the holograms, like the sky is black, but it was like blacker than the black sky.
Okay.
And I was getting these downloads that were very telepathic, and they said, "We are your intergalactic star family, and we have a message for you if you'd like to receive it." And I was just like, "What in the actual is going on?" Because I was in my right head at that time, so I knew I wasn't having any visual hallucinations or anything. So I said, yes, I'd like to receive that. And they showed me like the Giza pyramid plateau in Egypt.
Okay.
And Anubis, the like jackal-headed, god of like the underworld, stepped forward in the sky. And he said, congratulations. And he showed me this labyrinth appeared in the sky below the Giza plateau. And he said, "You've walked the labyrinth." And I said, "Okay." And I'm trying, like, in the moment, this makes no sense to me. Except I'm like, my husband's with me and I'm telling him, like, "Hey, you know that jackal?" I didn't know Anubis' name at the time. I was like, "You know that jackal had a god in Egypt? Like, I'm seeing him." And he's saying that, like, under the pyramids, there were these labyrinths and we walked them, and he's congratulating me. It's almost like this. This is going to sound egoic. It really isn't. In fact, this was a very humbling experience, but it was like this initiation into like, okay, you like cleared that level or something. Then they showed me like this Chinese conical hat in the sky, as well as like the Mexican step pyramids.
Okay.
And showed me like how they're all connected, and that these races, these intergalactic races, would come there. They were stargates, and they would teach the people from the dawning of time about civilization. They were like, it was like, it very much felt like this parent-child dynamic. Like I was just a young incarnation, like, and we're teaching you, and this is how it's always been for eons. Like it's in your ancient texts. It's like what I understood. Like we've always come to help humanity. And the love that I felt was like nothing I've ever experienced. Like in that moment, if I were to have any fear, it was just, I could feel the fear kind of coming up, and they were just like, no.
Yeah.
Like, this is what we are. And it was so loving. And then they kept coming into my experiences to the point where sometimes I go into full-blown channel and like release my own consciousness and allow them to come in and channel healings through people. And it was really intense for about a year. And then it kind of like titrated back a little bit, but they helped me write both of my books. And they were very clear about the messages in the books. And I even told them when I was writing my first book, I was just like, I don't know how to do this. Like, I'm not an author. I don't know a publisher. Like, how do you even do this? I was like, I have this whole book that you've downloaded into my head, but I don't know what to do with it. And so I kid you not, like 10 days later, after I said, I surrender this book to you, I'm going to put it on your altar and I trust that you'll show me the way. My husband sends me this like Instagram post of this publisher who's like a book medium, and she's about to take women on an island to go write books. And they were leaving in 2 weeks. And my husband's like, I think you should do this. And I was just like, interesting. Okay. I contacted her. She's like, I have room for literally just one more. And I went to the island. I wrote my first book, and it's just like doors kept opening. They downloaded a whole other book into my mind. And like, I can't take any credit for the way that all unfolded.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah.
And do you still have contact with them?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. In fact, I mean, gosh, my husband and I just went up to Sedona and stargazed, and I have videos. Like, I actually have video of a craft that materialized over our place in Sedona and stayed for a while. And then my husband, now he's learning and he's able to open himself up a little bit. And this is actually kind of funny. They told me, they were like, okay, he can sense who we are, ask him. And I was like, oh my gosh, they said that you can hear too, and you can sense who they are. And he goes, they're Sergions. Like, never heard of that before. Never heard of a Sergion. Anyways, I woke up the next morning and I typed it out in like my Google search. I'm like, Sergion. I was like, oh my God, surgeon. They're surgeons. And it was so crazy because what they were doing that night is they had us do this visualization of a DNA strand. And you could see the breaks in like the rung on the DNA ladder. And they were telling us, just fix the rung. And then after we would do that, the DNA would like light up gold and integrate back into our bodies. And I was like, oh my gosh, they were surgeons. Okay. I guess that makes perfect sense.
Interesting. So were they kind of healing you from something that then putting the DNA back in your body? Is that kind of what they were doing?
Yeah, felt like a DNA upgrade or some sort. I honestly can't tell you what like the healing was. I don't really know yet. That was a pretty recent experience. And sometimes these things take like months to unpack, but it's important for people to realize like these ET encounters, they're a consciousness experience.
Yeah.
It's like a different frequency that you can kind of learn to tune your mind to. And, my husband and I went on a cruise with Dr. Stephen Greer, and he kind of taught us how to contact. And I mean, we watched for hours, just crafts materialize above this cruise ship with like 200 other people in the Caribbean.
And are you all seeing the same thing, or are you seeing different
Oh yeah, they're getting videotaped and everything. I mean, the way these crafts typically appear, and according to Dr. Greer, they can't stay materialized for very long because our government has such sophisticated technology that if they're in full-blown materialization, they'll take them out. And so they partially materialize. I've seen them look like orbs of rainbow light. I've seen them look like full-blown. Just all of a sudden, you'll see a star, just looks like a normal star, but it'll move in like shapes or ways that like stars can't move, and it'll materialize fully, come really close, get really big, and then like zoom off and disappear like in a speed that no plane or anything could move across the sky. And I started doing this the E5 contacts with my boys. I have teen boys, and now like my youngest son gets videos of ET crafts. Like I'm jealous. Like they manifest for my 15-year-old more than anybody I know. It's wild.
Do you put the videos out anywhere?
Yeah, I'll put them in my stories.
Cool.
On Instagram.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing. Whenever they can.
Yeah, it's hard to get them because sometimes it's just real quick. But you just see them move in ways that you couldn't even comprehend.
Yeah. I think you're so fascinating. Just all the stuff that you've explored and that you've kind of figured out, and your curiosity for things, and just. Yeah, I think I'm so glad I got a chance to talk to you. If someone, I'll put your Instagram and your YouTube channel and your podcast all in the description of this podcast. But just if somebody wants to kind of learn about you, where's the best place they could go?
Instagram or my website, which is sacredrevolution.com. Yeah. And that's where, as we start hosting more and more of these retreats and become a little more public with it. It's been very private. I own a group counseling practice, and that's like my main business. And so it's traditional. And so I've really kept it very quiet, but it's going to definitely be more public next year. And we'll be putting all that information out on our website. I'll be putting it on my Instagram, which you named earlier is Kristy Danielle Crabby, but it'll be there too.
That's awesome. You're a fantastic guest, and I really, really appreciate you taking the time to talk. I mean, all this stuff, like I said, I could talk to you for days about all this stuff, I think, because I just think it's so interesting. And people like you that are kind of bringing all this stuff to the public, I think is fantastic. And I just love the way that you think, especially when you talked about like kind of the veterans and doing MDNA and like, why not help them and stuff like it. So just, we're on the same page about so many things. And that's why I'm so glad that you came on my show. So thank you so much. What's the name of your podcast also?
Oh, thanks. It's Transcendence Talks. So we just try to kind of bridge the gap between psychology and spirituality.
Yeah. It's a great podcast, by the way. So it's really good. So, and I'll put the link to your podcast also into the description of this podcast. So thank you so much for being on, Kristy. Thanks everybody for listening. Leave a comment, be sure to subscribe, and go follow Kristy. Go to her website, and maybe we will meet you at one of her retreats because I'm going on one. So thanks so much, everybody.
Thanks, Zach.